Hello, welcome back. It's been 2 weeks. I know, I apologize for my absence. I have been going through a lot with my allergies, and I could barely function the last 2 weeks. So I figured until I can get that under control, I'm not going to film or do anything of the sort. But I have, for the most part, like I still go through it here and there, but I can sit down and do this. And hope you all have been doing well the last 2 weeks. Hope we've been educating ourselves. No one is free until we are all free. Write that down. You can write that down just so you have it for your notes. But today's video, we're going to talk about. We're going to be very anti-capitalist in this video. We're going to make the case for overthrowing capitalism and why black capitalism is not going to save us. Sadly, I know. Support your black businesses, but black capitalism is not going to set us free. No one is free under capitalism. And so just to get into that, I might as well dive into it. So capitalism as a whole, top to bottom, capitalism as a whole needs to be disposed of. Not only is it damaging to black people, it's violent, it's unsustainable, it furthers inequality. It is a very unequal system. We have a very small minority at the top of our wealth chain, at the top of our wealth chart, controlling and pulling all the strings for the 99% of us. And I don't know who in their right mind, who in the working class can look at the system that we have and say, yeah, I think that this is the way to go. I think that I should have to work 3 jobs, or not me personally, but like, for example, someone working 2 or 3 jobs to pay for one house, to pay one rent, one car note, one this, one that, to keep food in one house. They are working who knows how many jobs. You have people working full time, and it being you can work full time and make like $15,000 a year. And that can be a full-time salary. Me and one of my friends calculated that a couple days ago. And having our unemployment, having the PUA and everything be more sustainable and more livable than an actual wage. If that is not an indictment of the system, I really don't know what is. So just to go further into it, there's no true equality under capitalism. There's no such thing as capitalism without exploitation. Capitalism started when slavery became a viable, a lucrative, a very profitable enterprise in America. So you take slavery and you see all the money that is made off of this free labor. And it just furthers more and more exploitation. So then we get the Emancipation Proclamation in 1865, and slaves are free. So then you pass the black codes to since you can't enslave them, but you can throw them in prison, and then you can convict lease them, and then you get free labor again. And this all plays into the legacy that capitalism has built for itself. And so just to go, white supremacy and anti-black and anti-indigenous, anti-Latinx, you name it, racism were all created with the express purpose of creating a justification for capitalist exploitation. Why? Africans and indigenous folks had the land and the resources, and capitalists needed both to build their empires. They justified theft and genocide by dehumanizing us, black people, and indigenous. And it's still happening. No one is ever going to be free under capitalism. I was just having an interaction yesterday with one of my friends on Twitter. They were talking about Starbucks. And as I might have mentioned before, but Starbucks uses prison labor to package their goods, to just do certain services for their products. And so, there you have it, a mega capitalist, just billion-dollar institution literally using prison labor, slave labor, to further their capitalist agenda. So they don't have to pay people a fair wage to get their service done. So if the structure is broken, it's going to be broken no matter how many black faces you stick in there. I don't care, because we see a black president didn't save us. Black businesses are not going to save us. Of course, continue to buy from them. I buy from them. Of course, continue. But that's not going to set us free. We need a more equal and just system. We need socialism. I mean, I'm just going to say it. We need socialism. We need the masses to own our land and our means of production, and we need the people who actually do who actually do the job and are actually in the ground, on the ground, getting their hands dirty, to actually own and have a say in what happens in this company. And at the beginning of this pandemic, when airlines were going through their whole, when airlines were plummeting and they were on the verge of collapse, and people were calling for the nationalization of airline companies. And I mean, that's very reasonable. Very reasonable. Put the power in the hands of the workers. Excuse me. Take the power out of that boardroom that sits 10 people, and they make the rules for an entire company. Let the workers make their rules. I mean, they do this job. They are the company. Those 10 men and maybe some women in a suit that sit at a boardroom table and prophesy on what needs to happen and this and that and that. I mean, they are not the company. They're just there. I mean, they had the right path to lead them to be on the board of an airline company. But I can tell you the pilots and the flight attendants and everything else, I mean, they're the company. And I mean, so why aren't they making the decisions? And just to go from that, I mean, building the power of the African masses, both on the continent and in the diaspora, is the only thing that's going to save us. Dismantling capitalism and pushing for socialism in the U.S. and on the African continent, an economic system where every single person is truly considered equal, where no land or nation can be exploited for the benefit of a callous few, is what's going to set us free. And with the African diaspora, meaning black people that are here in America, North America, and South America, the islands, that's what's going to set us free, us overthrowing, or us at least trying to push back as much as we can against this very unequal, just violent, just heinous system. I mean, people die at the hands of capitalism. Capitalism is what's killing our environment. Capitalism is going to kill us eventually if we don't get a handle on it. Excuse me. So we need to push for another system. This system, I mean, during this pandemic, all the myths of capitalism have come to the light. We have provided homeless with shelter. We've magically sent out $1,200 stimulus checks to people. All these things where we say, where's this money going to come from? Now this money is appearing. All these things, how are we going to pay for this? How are we going to pay for that? Now this money is appearing, but I mean, they gave the corporations billions of dollars. They gave the billionaires more money, but they gave us $1,200, and I mean, they did that in April. It's July 13th, so excuse me. I mean, so we see who capitalism is going to benefit. It's not going to benefit the 99%. Sorry. I'm sorry to burst anyone's bubble before they break into their millions. I know capitalism has us all thinking that we're pre-rich, that we are all just 2 steps away, 2 steps from breaking into our money pit. I hate to be the bearer of bad news. I really do. I really, really do. But no. So let's just continue. I mean, I wouldn't be doing my job if I wasn't giving you the real on the real. While the politics of transformative black ownership animate the world of entertainment, it can be poisonous for public policy. And I say this because when I'm talking about like Jay-Z and Diddy and Killer Mike and like all these black men, very successful, deservedly so, black men who almost push for a more robust face of capitalism, pushing for us to invest more into capitalism. And I mean, because they've seen, of course, their pockets get deeper and deeper over the last 20 years. And I mean, they feel like they can, I guess, push that ideology on us. And I don't want to say I don't fault them, because I feel like I do fault them, because, okay, you have made $1 billion, close to $1 billion, what have you. But that does not mean that just because you, a black man, Jay-Z, P. Diddy, Killer Mike, you a black man that's made all this money. That does not mean that capitalism is not still inextricably linked to racism. It is still inextricably linked to the super exploitation of black people, including you at one point. And so, and I mean, just to go from that, we cannot financial literacy our ways out of poverty. That's not how this works. Capitalism is not meant to be shaken. Capitalism makes poverty, and I mean, it makes it a cycle. It puts a certain amount of people, it puts certain groups of people in these very concentrated, impoverished neighborhoods, as I mentioned before. It refuses resources to those neighborhoods. It just sucks all the life out of them. It does not, the government, as I should say, the government and their policies don't do anything to help these help these neighborhoods, They don't do anything to help these neighborhoods. And then you get low productivity, and you get all of these, you get all of these factors when you have, next to no life in your, next to no economic life in your neighborhood. You get all of this crime, and you get and you get poverty, and you get unemployment rates soaring, and you get all of these things that we see when we, all these things that we think about when we think about poverty. And we're like, and people think that capitalism can save us. Capitalism, let me say this. I will say certain facets of poverty can maybe be mitigated under capitalism, not by way of capitalism, because anything social welfare-esque, it's usually in the fashion of socialism, which is what we need. But those things, those atrocities can be kind of mitigated under capitalism, but it is just quite impossible for us to eradicate poverty and still have capitalism. They cannot coexist. We have to get rid of capitalism. That is what drives this this class system. That is what makes a certain group of people at the lower rung of society, and then everyone else gets to just step on top of them and make all their money on their backs, as I said with environmental racism. All these huge capitalist institutions and the government giving them policy to put their one second, iced coffee, cheers, giving them policy to be able to use these neighborhoods and use these areas where these black and brown people live to dump waste and pollute the air and give all of this and give way to. And this is, as I said, this is capitalism killing us. This is capitalism literally murdering people. And so in America, every stage of the business life cycle, the economy beats black businesses like a piñata, battered by higher insurance prices, hammered by stingy investors. This is from The Nation, by the way, written by Aaron Ross Coleman. Hammered by stingy investors, pummeled by exclusive supply chains, assaulted by recessions, thrashed by exclusionary regulators, pounded by an intergenerational wealth gap, and hobbled by a hobbled community of marginal black worker entrepreneurs must compete with monopolies and oligopolies like Walmart and Amazon, flush with cash and bolstered by lobbyists. As I said before, black capitalism, it was started under the Nixon administration. It was a very unfulfilled promise. It's almost turned into like a myth now. But, so that is not what's going to set us free, as I keep repeating myself on that. And, let me make sure I'm quoting this right. Yes, the Black Liberation Collective, this is a quote from them. As an organization, we stand against capitalist notions of infinite profit, homogenized markets, and private means of production. Capitalism is the economic system used to justify our oppression as black people, both our marginalization and our exploitation. As black people, both in the United States and abroad, meaning the diaspora, we have an intimate and painful history of labor exploitation that is unrivaled throughout the world, and this labor system has evolved into wage labor, slavery that further isolates us from each other in the struggle for freedom. We reject labor exploitation, privatizing natural resources, and the neoliberal ideologies that fixate on the pathologies of a population as opposed to the pathologies of institutions. With this being said, we resist notions that supporting black businesses will be our ultimate savior in our attempts to gain freedom. And like I said, support your black businesses, but be mindful that that black business or any other black businesses is not going to set us free. That's not what's going to lead us to black liberation. We cannot have black liberation and also still have capitalism. Capitalism almost orchestrated white supremacy and right supremacy, thus gave us black exploitation, gave us slavery, and gave us all of these things to justify black people being exploited. Capitalism needed a way to absorb the shock that comes with, with the recessions we see in capitalism, with just the rampant inequality that we see with that capitalism. Capitalism orchestrated a entire ideology, white supremacy, to justify why this group of people should be inferior, should be second-class citizens in this country. And I was reading, when I was doing my research for this, it was like an excerpt of something, and it was saying how in other countries you are the same color as the person that's oppressing you. You and the person that may have you in bondage are the same color, but in America it was white and black. So it was very clear on which population was going to be oppressed. It was very easy to point to those people and be like, well, I'm better than you, I'm the superior race, I'm this, I'm that. So we're going to subjugate you to a second-class citizenry for generations to come. And here we are in 2020 still grappling with the remnants of slavery. And let's just get into it. Let's get further into it. For example, following the Emancipation Proclamation of 1863, this is going to be a repeat of what I said, agriculture was still the main economic engine, and free exploited labor was needed for this industry to survive. Capitalism evolved by maintaining its racist and exploitative roots through policymakers passing the Black Codes of 1865 and 66, making it easier to imprison recently freed slaves to continue the supply of free labor. So now we freed them. So now, how are we going to get all this free labor? Now they can go and do whatever they want. But now we can write it into the laws. We can make it institutional, systemic racism to lead them right back to where we want them to get, right back where we need them to be, so we can continue this free labor train. And let me go. Okay, racism is intimately linked to capitalism. Capitalism is racial capitalism. Capital does not appear from nowhere. The original capital was provided by the labor of slaves during the American Revolution, and then so on and so forth. The ultimate eradication of racism is going to require us to move more toward a socialist economic system. We cannot begin to talk about a more racially just society, and more specifically an economic system that's more racially just, without talking about the exploitation of Black people, Latinx people, indigenized people. You name the racialized group that hasn't been exploited under capitalism. There is not one. And so the idea of the prison industrial complex, as I mentioned in another video, requires us to understand the globalization of capitalism and the way that capitalism is steeped in exploitation. You have people that are incarcerated being treated as slaves. And that's why I made my video on prison abolition, because we still have slaves on American soil. As I said at the beginning of the video, no one is free until we're all free. This is why there is no reason to be celebrating 4th of July. There's no reason to ever celebrate that holiday, because until we are all free, meaning that just because you may be out but you can't vote, conditional freedom is not freedom. So until we are all free unequivocally, unconditionally, none of us are free. And that's why I make these videos, because I know I'm not going to set us free. I know what I'm saying is not going to set us free, but I want you all to understand the depths of these issues. Just how serious and how deep. And this is not a surface level movement that we're in. The movement for Black liberation, the movement for just formation of a new system is not surface. It's not easy. It's not going to be quick and fast. It is going to take, a lot of this. It's going to take a lot of educating and reading and just, someone had to educate me. I had to go and read this and look at videos and do all of this. And so it's going to take that from many, many more people. And so moving on, capitalism first emerged as a world system through the anti-black racism generated by the transatlantic slave trade, and it has depended on racism to ensure its perpetration and reproduction ever since. Karl Marx argued, slavery is an economic category like any other. Needless to say, we are dealing with direct slavery, with Negro slavery in Suriname in Brazil and the southern states of North America. Direct slavery is just as much the pivot of the bourgeois industry as machinery credits, etc. Without slavery, you have no cotton. Without cotton, you have no modern industry. It is slavery that gave the colonies their value. It is the colonies that created world trade, and it is the world trade that is the precondition of large-scale industry. Thus, slavery is an economic category of the greatest importance. So there you have it. And like I said, after the Emancipation Proclamation, you get the Black Codes and you get convict leasing. And then even after that, the next iteration of that just became giving Black people, or just like not employing them, or giving them how do I even say it? Really just the scum, the bottom of the barrel jobs. That's what I'm trying to get at. Just giving them the bottom of the barrel jobs, and that leads me to my next point. Since capitalism never could end cyclical downturns and their awful effects, its survival required making those effects somehow socially tolerable. Systemic racism survived in the post-Civil War United States, but partly because it helped to achieve that tolerability. U.S. capitalism solved its instability problem by making cyclical downturns afflict chiefly a minority subpart of the whole working class, Black people, indigenous people. It positioned that minority to bear the brunt of each cycle and suffer its damages disproportionately. That minority was repeatedly drawn into and thrown out of jobs as the cycle dictated. Any savings it might accumulate when working would be lost when unemployed. Repeated firings precluded such a minority from enjoying the benefits of job longevity, seniority, promotion, household stability, you name it. Poverty disrupted households and families. Unaffordable housing, education, medical care would haunt such a minority. It becomes capitalism business cycle shock absorber, the last hired first fired across the 4 to 7 year average duration of its cycle. That's from the Milwaukee Independent, which is a journalism organization that's like really involved in just like social engagement, really involved in, what I'm talking about now, us taking inventory, us assessing the system that oppresses us all. Capitalism oppresses us all. But like I said, we're not going to get Black liberation unless we eradicate capitalism, or unless we can at least push back against it. I know capitalism is not going to disappear overnight, but at least push back against it. And so for capitalism, making such a minority absorb most of the costs of capitalism's instability allowed the majority of the working class to be relatively exempted, relieved, and freed from them. The majority could be less subject to the cycles because the minority was made relatively more subject. Capitalism promised the majority relatively secure jobs and incomes because it took away from the minority. The majority could thus worry less about the next cycle, whereas the minority had to worry more to adjust to their lives more. Racists could then attribute the resulting differences between minority and majority subparts of a population to inherent qualities of different races instead of, what it is, capitalism. And so here we are in 2020, I guess kind of in the middle of a recession, and we see who's being hit the hardest with this. We see, just those in the lower income bracket really suffering the brunt of this. And even in 2008, when we literally had a whole recession, people losing their homes and, just the wealth. White wealth is 13 times that of Black wealth. And so when recessions hit, it just widens that gap. So, I'm sorry. Oh, okay. I'm going to say this. I don't want this video to be too long, so I'm going to say this, and I might end it here. A significant portion of the white working class in all capitalism has always been forced into the shock absorber role, white trash, quote unquote. In U.S. capitalism was never far from the African American. White trash in U.S. capitalism was never far from the African Americans similarly situated. There thus rose possibilities of class solidarity between black and white working class communities. U.S. history displays moments when those possibilities were realized, as C. Van Woodward documented so well. It also displays moments of intense racist violence used to block the realization of those possibilities. Employers played on those racialized differences to keep employees from unifying against them, and bitter competitions between black and white shock absorbers from cyclically scarce jobs. Whites could often and did use racism to gain advantages and access to those jobs in multiple ways. Then capitalism fostered and benefited from racism. It is thus deeply settled into the system. When we get Europeans starting to come over from Europe, immigrate from Europe in the 20th century, and of course black people born here are also going for those same jobs that the immigrants are going to, you see the powers that be, the companies, and the capitalist machine use racism to benefit, dividing them. These immigrants, of course, when they came over, being new to the country, not knowing the language maybe, but then when they were able to assimilate into white culture and whiteness, they saw the benefit that anti-blackness provided them in their access to jobs and their access to housing and just their access to becoming an American citizen was to be anti-black. And so there was, the company and the powers knew that, as I just read, that there was a possibility of class solidarity, and that there was a possibility of their solidarity. Then there's a possibility for revolution, and so racism became a tool of capitalism, and then that just became more settled into capitalism. And it just became, like as I said, it's inextricably linked from slavery to, as I said, in the 20th century with immigrants, European immigrants and black people fighting for the same jobs, but the immigrants, of course, eventually using racism to distance themselves from black people. Although I'm an immigrant, I'm not black, whatever. And so I don't think there is... I think that's pretty much all I need to say. As I said several times in the video, until all of us are free, none of us are free. Capitalism oppresses all of us. None of us are free under capitalism. I'm so sorry to tell you that. You may feel that you go outside and, you can live your life as a regular free citizen, but no. Capitalism constrains us all. Capitalism, we are all constrained in some sort of wage labor to survive. So, and if you don't have that, then, you can lose so much just from losing your income. And I think I did have one more thing in here that I wanted to... Yes, I have this one more thing before I go. Fundamental injustice characterized the relationship between police and prisons on the one hand, and the African American community and other communities, indigenous people and people of color. Let me reread that. Fundamental injustice characterized the relationship between police and prisons on the one hand, and the African American and other communities, indigenous people of color, condemned to play capitalism's shock absorber role on the other. The solution was and is not better training or more funding. Both have been tried repeatedly and have likewise failed repeatedly. A real solution would provide a decently paid job to everyone who wants one as a matter of right. Unemployment would then be outlawed, much like slavery and child abuse, etc. Taxes levied on capitalist enterprises would provide the funds needed to find jobs, private or public. Imagine that. Imagine if we taxed Amazon and Jeff Bezos and Target and all these billion-dollar institutions that seem to evade taxes so seamlessly. But I digress. For those laid off by an employer, much as taxes help fund unemployment insurance now. Those funds would include wages or salaries paid for each worker's time being laid off and rehired. Minimum wages applied universally will cover reasonable housing, transport, healthcare, and living costs. If only we could tax these billion-dollar, trillion-dollar institutions, we could have, it seems like we would almost have a decent quality of life for everyone. And healthcare is just a human right. I mean, I want us to disavow that you need to work to get healthcare and work to get housing. Those things should be human rights. And with all the money that flows through this country and all the money that that would be made by literally just taxing those that have billions of dollars, I mean, we could provide healthcare, education, and housing for all that need it. So, I think that's where I'm going to leave it. I think this was like almost a half hour, so I'm going to leave it there. And I hope everyone has a great day. Stay radical, stay loud, become a socialist, read some radical texts. None of us are free until we're all free. And yeah, thank you.